He waited all night for his blind date and sat with the wrong woman who changed his life. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us get back to our main character. The snow fell like silver dust over Manhattan that night. Streetlights glowed through the haze, and inside a nearly empty cafe, the soft hiss of the espresso machine mixed with the faint jazz humming from the speakers. Every table was empty except one table 5 where a man in a dark coat sat, shoulders slightly tense, a single cup of coffee gone cold in front of him. His name was Peter Langford, and he had been waiting for 2 hours. The woman he was supposed to meet from the dating app Clara, age 29, loves travel and dogs had not shown up. The waiter had refilled his cup twice, glancing at him with a mix of pity and curiosity. Peter checked his phone again. No message. Just silence and the reflection of his own tired eyes on the black screen. Outside, a gust of wind pushed open the door, and a swirl of snow blew in with it. A woman stumbled inside, clutching a paper grocery bag that had split open at the bottom. A loaf of bread rolled across the floor. She froze, cheeks flushed, hair dusted white, shoes soaked through. For a moment, everyone in the cafe turned to look. Peter's gaze caught hers. She looked startled, like a stray caught in headlights. Before he could think twice, he stood up and walked toward her. "Clara?" he asked. The woman blinked. I what?" He smiled awkwardly. "You look just like your profile picture. I almost thought you would not come." Quote. Something in his voice, warm, certain, maybe a little desperate, made her hesitate. The staff was already cleaning up. The closed sign hung half-turned on the door. The heat inside felt like heaven after the storm outside. She drew a slow breath, then shrugged slightly. "Sure," she said, "why not?" Peter gestured toward his table. "Can I get you something hot?" "Tea," she murmured. "Anything warm." He waved to the waiter, then looked back at her. "I was starting to think my date stood me up." She gave a tiny laugh. Maybe she did. There was a silence between them, awkward but not uncomfortable. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped them around the steaming cup when it arrived. Peter noticed the small scar on her wrist, the frayed edge of her coat sleeve, and the way she kept glancing toward the window as if measuring how long she could stay. "Rough night?" he asked. "You could say that," she replied. "My babysitter canceled, my landlord texted, and then my grocery bag exploded. So yeah, kind of." Peter hesitated, surprised by her honesty. "You have a kid? 7 years old. Smart enough to ask for Santa, but not for new shoes," she said softly, half joking, half sad. For a heartbeat, Peter said nothing. He had expected small talk, not confessions. And maybe that was what kept him from correcting her, telling her he was not the man she was supposed to meet. Because in that moment, watching the woman in the red scarf blowing gently on her tea, he realized he did not want the night to end just yet. Outside, the snow fell heavier, wrapping the city in a hush. Inside, at table 5, 2 strangers sat together, one pretending to be someone he was not, the other pretending everything was fine. The next morning, the snow outside had turned into a thin, gray slush. Peter woke up in his small apartment above the hardware store, the kind of place where the radiator clanged louder than any alarm clock. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, still thinking about last night, the woman in the red scarf, the way her hands trembled around a cup of tea, and the way she smiled even though she looked exhausted. He reached for his phone. Still no text from the real Clara. A small, wry smile crossed his lips. "Figures," he muttered. Maybe fate had mixed up the tables on purpose. Across town, Grace hurried down the icy sidewalk, her son's backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She had left before dawn, slipping out quietly so she would not wake him. The babysitter next door was late again, and her shift at the diner started in 20 minutes. She could still feel the warmth from the coffee Peter had bought her. A stranger's kindness, she thought, rare and undeserved. When the morning rush hit the diner, Grace moved fast between the booths, pen tucked behind her ear, smile fixed on her face. "Refill for you, sir?" she asked one table, her voice bright, though her eyes looked tired. Then she froze. At booth number 3, sitting with his laptop open and a cup of coffee untouched, was Peter. For a second, she wondered if he had followed her, but then she saw his expression, surprised and unsure, just like hers. "Hey," he said, standing up slightly. "You work here?" Grace tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Apparently. And you? Stalking strangers now?" He laughed. No, I'm just grabbing breakfast before work. Work, she repeated, eyeing his coat. In tech, right? Peter nodded. Something like that. She arched a brow. You say that like it's a secret. He grinned but did not answer. Instead, he gestured at the empty seat across from him. Join me for 5 minutes? Consider it a do-over from last night. She hesitated. The manager was watching. Her shift was full, but something in his voice, steady, kind, maybe a little lonely, made her sit down anyway. So, he said, was last night your worst blind date ever? Grace laughed softly. Only if you count the part where I was not supposed to be there. Well, Peter said, then it was the best wrong table I have ever sat at. They both smiled, and for a moment, the noise of the diner faded. Grace looked at him, trying to guess what kind of man he really was. His hands were steady but calloused, not the hands of someone who only typed on a keyboard. His eyes had that tired calm the kind people get after losing something they do not talk about. When the bell above the door chimed and her manager cleared his throat, Grace stood up quickly. Duty calls, she said. Peter reached into his wallet and placed a few bills on the table. Then I'll make sure to leave a good tip for the waitress who saved my night. Save it, she said with a smile. You already paid for my tea. As she turned away, Peter watched her slip between tables like a quiet rhythm in a song he did not know he needed to hear again. He opened his laptop but never typed a word. Outside, the sky was beginning to clear. The snow that had fallen all night was melting into puddles, reflecting the morning light. Peter sipped his coffee and thought, maybe some mistakes are worth repeating. Have you ever met someone twice in the most unexpected way and wondered if the universe was trying to tell you something? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. The days that followed passed in a blur of work and melting snow. The city thawed slowly, and with it, something inside Peter began to shift too. Every morning he stopped by the diner not for the food but for Grace. She never asked why he kept coming back. She would just smile when she saw him waiting in his usual booth near the window, tapping his fingers on the table like a man who had nowhere better to be. One morning, as she poured his coffee, he noticed a small sketchbook sticking out of her apron pocket. The corner of the pages was smudged with pencil marks. You draw? He asked. Grace froze for a second, then tucked the sketchbook deeper into her pocket. A little, nothing serious. Peter smiled. That sounded defensive. People who say that usually have talent. She shrugged. People with talent usually have time. I do not. Her tone was light, but there was a quiet ache underneath it. Peter could tell she had more to say, but the bell above the door rang, and another customer waved her over. She gave him a quick smile and hurried away. Later, when her shift ended, Peter was still there, his laptop closed, his coffee cold. Grace walked past his table, adjusting her scarf. You do not have to stay this long, you know, she said. Maybe I just like the company, he replied. She rolled her eyes. You do not even know me. He looked up at her. Then let me fix that. It was an invitation so simple that even Grace, used to turning people down, could not find a reason to refuse. That evening, they walked together through Central Park, the ground still wet from melting snow. Grace carried her sketchbook in one hand, flipping through pages filled with quick, imperfect drawings, faces, coffee cups, rooftops seen from her apartment window. You really do draw, Peter said softly. And you are good. She laughed. You are just being nice. No, he said, shaking his head. I mean it. You see details most people miss. Grace slowed her pace. I used to think I could do something with it, maybe teach art or open a small studio, but life happened. Quote. Peter glanced at her. Life usually does. They stopped near a frozen pond where the surface was half cracked, reflecting the last of the evening light. Grace tore a page from her sketchbook, handed it to him shyly. It was a drawing of the cafe, the very table where they first met. I drew this after that night, she said. It was the first time I felt noticed. Peter stared at the drawing for a long moment. The tiny details, the steam from the cups, the crooked closed sign were all there. It is beautiful, he whispered. She smiled, then looked away quickly. Do not make fun of me. I am not, he said. I am just wondering what the world would look like if you had more time to draw. Grace laughed softly. Probably less clean dishes at the diner. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their breath fade into the cold air. Peter wanted to tell her who he really was, that he owned the cafe chain she worked for, that the man she thought was just in tech was actually her boss. But something inside him stopped him. Not yet. Not when she was finally talking to him like a person, not a paycheck. When they said goodnight, Grace waved her sketchbook like a promise. Next time, she said, I will draw you. Peter grinned. Make sure to get my good side. Kud. As she disappeared down the street, he looked at the drawing again, folding it carefully and tucking it into his coat pocket. The lines were uneven, the strokes unsure, but it felt real. The following week, the weather finally softened. The air in the city carried that faint smell of spring rain and street coffee, the kind that made everything feel possible again. Peter stopped by the diner as usual, but this time he waited outside instead of taking his regular seat. When Grace finished her shift, she found him leaning against the window holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You are early," she said, surprised. He smiled. "You said you hate drinking the diner's coffee, so I brought you something better." She took the cup, a little amused, a little touched. "I do not remember saying that out loud." "You did not," he said, grinning. "You made a face." They walked together down the street, steam rising from their cups, shoes splashing in shallow puddles. The city buzzed around them, car horns, laughter, the rhythm of life continuing like background music. "I was thinking about your sketches," Peter said after a pause. "You ever thought of showing them? Like in a small gallery or even online?" Grace laughed softly. "Show them? To who? My audience of one? You already saw them." "I am serious," he said. "People would love them." She shook her head. "Peter, I can barely afford bus fare some days. Art is not survival. It is what people do when they can afford to dream." Peter stopped walking. "Maybe you should not have to choose." His voice was quiet, but it hit her like a chord she had forgotten how to hear. Grace stared at him for a moment, searching for the right words, then looked away. "You sound like someone who never had to worry about rent." Peter's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "Maybe I just remember what it is like to want something you cannot reach." "Ah!" Grace did not reply, and they continued walking in silence. They reached a small park near the edge of downtown. Grace sat on a bench, pulling her sketchbook from her bag. "I draw here sometimes," she said. "It is peaceful. I can see the city, but it feels far enough away to breathe." Peter sat beside her, watching as she began to draw. The wind lifted strands of her hair across her face, and she brushed them away, focused. Her pencil moved quickly, shaping the outline of buildings and trees. "What do you see when you draw?" he asked. She smiled slightly. "Not what is there, what could be there." He nodded, understanding more than she realized. When she finished, she turned the sketchbook toward him. "See? Not perfect, but it is real." He studied it. "It is better than perfect. It feels alive." For a moment, neither spoke. The city hummed in the distance, the late afternoon light painting everything gold. Grace closed the book and said quietly, "You know, you are strange." Peter laughed. "That sounds like a compliment." "It is," she said. "Most people either pity me or ignore me. You just listen." He looked at her, his voice soft. "Maybe that is because you have something worth hearing." Something unspoken hung between them, fragile but undeniable. Later that evening, as Grace packed her things, Peter hesitated. "Would you ever work somewhere else?" he asked. "A place that values what you can do, not just what you serve?" Grace frowned. "Like where?" He shrugged. "I might know someone who is hiring." She laughed. "Oh, really? Doing what, professional doodler?" "Something like that," he said. "I could recommend you." Grace tilted her head, curious. "You really are full of surprises, Peter." "Maybe just full of ideas," he replied, smiling, "and hope." Quote. When she waved goodbye that night, Peter stood watching her walk away, her red scarf fluttering behind her. He slipped his hand into his coat pocket and touched the folded sketches she had given him. He knew he was crossing a line, getting involved, hiding who he really was, but he could not stop. Because every time she smiled, he remembered why he had started his business in the first place. Not for profit, but for people like her. A few days later, the city woke to steady rain, the kind that turned every streetlight into a blurred halo and made even New York feel quiet for a while. Peter was at the cafe headquarters early that morning, long before anyone else arrived. His office looked over the skyline, but today he could barely see it through the fogged windows. He should have been in a meeting with the board, reviewing quarterly growth. Instead, he found himself scrolling through his phone, looking at the photo he had taken of Grace's drawing the cafe table, the steaming cups, the soft light. It was not just art, it was memory. He turned off the screen and leaned back in his chair. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Down the street, Grace finished her double shift at the diner. She wiped her hands on her apron and checked the time. Past midnight again. Her son was staying with the neighbor, and the apartment would be cold when she got home. She thought about Peter's question from the other night. Would you ever work somewhere else? She had laughed it off then, but the words stuck with her. She could not picture a somewhere else. People like her did not get to start over. They just survived. As she walked toward the bus stop, she spotted a small notice taped to the cafe's front window. Now hiring, community project assistant. The sign was printed neatly, with a logo she recognized the same as on Peter's laptop. Her breath caught. That weekend, she showed up for the interview wearing the only blazer she owned. The lobby was sleek and modern, with gold lettering that read Snow Bean Cafe Group. The receptionist smiled warmly. "You must be Grace. Mr. Langford will see you now." She froze. "Mr. Langford?" "Yes, Peter Langford, our founder." The air seemed to disappear. Founder? She thought he was just a regular employee, maybe a manager at most. As she walked down the hall, her heartbeat drowned out the sound of her own footsteps. When the office door opened, Peter was standing by the window, the rain behind him painting streaks of silver light. He looked different. No hoodie, no coffee cup, just a quiet confidence that came with truth. "Grace," he said softly, "you came." She stared at him, unable to speak. "You? You own this place?" He nodded. "I do." "Cray." She let out a short, shaky laugh. "You let me believe you worked in tech." "I do," he said gently. "Coffee tech." Her voice rose. "You could have told me, Peter. You let me sit there talking about bills and bus fares while I wanted to know you without all of this," he interrupted. "Without the title, without the name. I just wanted to see who you were." She looked away, her throat tightening. "And now what? I get the job because you feel sorry for me?" He stepped closer, his expression steady. "No, you get it because you earned it, because you care about people. And that is exactly what this project is about, helping single parents find stability, training, real support." Grace hesitated, anger and disbelief warring inside her. "You could have just told me." "I was afraid if I did," Peter said quietly, "you would stop seeing me the same way." Quote. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the window, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Finally, Grace took a deep breath. "I need time to think." Peter nodded. "Take all the time you need. The offer will still be here." She turned toward the door, then stopped. "You really think I could run something like that?" "I know you can," he said. Grace looked at him for one last moment before walking away, her footsteps fading down the hall. Peter stood alone in the silence, his hand resting on the drawing she had given him weeks ago, the fountain, the 2 coffee cups, the words written in pencil. "Some mistakes are worth repeating." He read the line again, wondering if this one would be. 3 days passed before Peter saw her again. The rain had stopped. The streets sparkled with the kind of light that comes only after a storm. But for him, the silence felt heavier than any downpour. Every morning he waited. Every evening he checked his phone, hoping for a message that never came. The office buzzed with routine, the sound of meetings, the click of keyboards, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. "Grace." Then one afternoon, his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Langford, someone is here to see you." Peter looked up, his heart stuttering. "Send her in." Grace stepped inside, her red scarf draped around her neck, the same one from that snowy night. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held a mix of disappointment and exhaustion. "I almost did not come," she said quietly. "I am glad you did," Peter replied. "Please, sit." She remained standing. "You said you wanted to know me without the title, but you did not give me that same honesty. You had all the power in the room, and I had no idea." Peter took a slow breath. "You are right, I should have told you. I just wanted something real," she interrupted. "You said that. But real does not start with pretending." He nodded, accepting the truth of her words. "Then let me start over, no pretending. My name is Peter Langford. I own Snow Bean Cafe. And I am the man who waited all night for a blind date, only to meet the wrong woman and never stop thinking about her." The corner of her mouth twitched, but she did not smile. "You really believe fate works like that?" "I believe it gave me a second chance to do better," he said. "To be better." Quote. For the first time, her gaze softened. She looked around the office, modern, polished, full of quiet success, and then back at him. "What exactly do you want from me, Peter?" "I want you to take the job," he said. "Lead the community project. Use your art, your ideas, your heart. You said drawing helps you see what could be there. That is exactly what I need this company to remember, what could be there." Grace hesitated. "And what about us?" He looked at her carefully. "That is up to you." Quote. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt fragile, heavy with what had been broken and what might still be fixed. Finally, she sighed. "I will take the job, but not because I owe you anything, because I believe in what it could mean for people like me." Peter smiled faintly. "That is the best reason." She turned toward the door, then paused. "One more thing." "Yes?" "If you ever lie to me again," she said, her tone steady but quiet, "it will be the last time we speak." Quote, "I will not," he promised. "No more lies." Grace nodded once, then left the office. Peter stood alone, the door closing softly behind her. For the first time in days, he felt something like hope. It was fragile, but it was real. That evening, he walked past the diner on his way home. Through the window, he saw Grace helping a coworker pack boxes of leftover food for donation. She looked tired, but peaceful. A woman who had spent her life carrying the world and somehow still found ways to make it gentler. He did not go inside. He just watched for a moment, smiling to himself, then continued down the quiet street. Under the streetlight, he pulled out his phone and opened a blank note. He typed one line, "Real things begin where the lies end." He saved it, then tucked his hands in his pockets as the wind lifted faint traces of her perfume still lingering on his coat. If you were Grace, would you give him another chance after that reveal? Tell me in the comments, do you think honesty can rebuild something that started with a lie? 2 months later, the world around them had changed quietly, like a film slowly coming into focus. The new Snowbean Community Project was already in motion, training programs for single parents, art classes, and mentorships built inside the same cafes where people once came only for coffee. And at the center of it all was Grace. Every morning she arrived early, sketchbook in hand, with that mix of nervousness and determination that made her impossible to ignore. Peter kept his distance, respecting her boundaries, but every time he saw her leading a meeting or encouraging a shy parent to speak up, pride stirred in him like sunlight through the window. Still, things between them remained fragile. Their conversations were polite, careful. The kind of conversations that lived on the edge of something deeper but never crossed it. One evening, after the day's work ended, Grace stood alone in the small studio space attached to the cafe. The walls were lined with paintings from local artists, and one corner displayed her sketches, simple pencil drawings of city life, of ordinary people with quiet hope in their eyes. Peter appeared in the doorway holding 2 paper cups. "Hot chocolate," he said softly. "I remember you hate coffee after hours." She smiled faintly, accepting the cup. "You remember everything, do you not?" "Only the important things." They stood in silence for a moment, sipping, watching the rain blur the city lights outside the window. Then Grace spoke, her voice calm but distant. "You know, when I started this job, people told me I was crazy. They said you only hired me because you felt guilty." Peter looked at her. "And what do you believe?" She turned to face him. "I believe you meant it when you said you wanted to help. But sometimes I wonder if you are helping the world, or trying to fix what you broke between us." The words hit him like a quiet truth. He set his cup down, hands in his pockets. "Maybe both," he admitted, "but one does not cancel out the other." Grace sighed, looking down at her hands. "You know what the hardest part is? Not the lie. It is realizing that for a while I believed you were just a man who waited in a cafe for a woman who never came, that you were ordinary, that I could reach you." He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I am ordinary, Grace. I just got good at pretending I was not." She met his eyes, searching them for the truth this time. What she saw there was not arrogance or charm, just a man stripped of everything except sincerity. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the skyline. Grace walked toward one of her sketches, pinned on the wall, the drawing of the fountain from their first day at Bryant Park. "You know," she said softly, "I kept drawing fountains after that day. I think it was the idea of something that keeps flowing even when the world stops paying attention." Peter smiled. "Maybe we are both fountains. We keep running even when no one's watching." For the first time in weeks, Grace laughed quietly. "That might be the most poetic thing you have said yet." Quote, "Then maybe I am learning from you," he said gently. There was a pause, the kind that felt like standing at the edge of a confession. Peter wanted to reach out, to bridge the space between them, but before he could, the front door opened and one of the volunteers called out, "Grace, we need you to approve the new schedule." She blinked, stepping back quickly. "Coming!" As she turned to leave, Peter said softly, "Grace, for what it is worth, I never stopped waiting." Quote. She paused at the door, her hand resting on the frame. For a moment, she almost looked back, but then she whispered, "Maybe that is the problem, Peter. You keep waiting for fate to fix things. Sometimes you have to move first." And with that, she walked away, leaving him standing alone in the soft glow of her sketches. He stared after her, the echo of her words sinking deep. For the first time, he realized she was right. 2 weeks later, The Snowbean Foundation hosted its first community showcase night, an event meant to celebrate the people Grace had been working with and the art they had created together. The cafe's main branch had been transformed for the evening. Soft golden lights, rows of framed sketches and paintings, laughter echoing between the tables. For everyone else, it was a celebration. For Peter, it was a chance to do something he should have done long ago: act instead of wait. He had spent the past few nights writing a speech he could barely finish, because every line felt too small compared to what she had done. Grace had turned a business initiative into a place where broken dreams found their second wind, and tonight he wanted her to see what she meant to the people around her and to him. As guests filled the space, Grace moved through the crowd with quiet grace, her red scarf draped loosely around her shoulders. She stopped to greet volunteers, smiling shyly when someone complimented her art wall. Every inch of her looked confident, yet Peter could tell she still carried that careful distance in her eyes. When it was time for the presentations, Peter walked up to the small stage. The microphone hummed softly as the room quieted. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "When we started this project, I thought it would be about business growth, building a stronger community around a cup of coffee. But then I met someone who showed me that connection does not start with profit. It starts with empathy." He glanced at Grace across the room. Her eyes widened slightly, realizing where this was going. Peter continued, voice steady. "This woman taught me that kindness is not a strategy. It is a choice. She turned our cafes into places of healing and hope. And tonight, I want to thank her the only way I know how, by dedicating something permanent to her vision." Quote. He gestured to the staff by the curtains behind him. "Please, unveil it." The fabric dropped, revealing a sign above a gallery door. "The Grace Studio, where second chances begin." A quiet gasp moved through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Applause followed. Grace stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she covered her mouth. Her name on the wall, shining softly under the lights, felt surreal. Peter looked directly at her. "You once told me that you draw not what is there, but what could be there. This studio will make sure others get to see that too. It is your legacy, Grace." The room erupted in applause again, but Grace barely heard it. She walked toward him slowly, the sound fading around her. When she reached the stage, she said softly, "You did not have to do this." "I did," Peter replied, "because what you built here deserves a future. And because I needed to show you, not tell you, that I meant every word." Her eyes shimmered under the warm lights. "Peter," she began, but her voice broke. He stepped closer, careful, respectful. "You once said I keep waiting for fate to fix things. You were right. I am done waiting." For a moment, the room seemed to blur into stillness. Every sound, every heartbeat slowed. Then Grace took a deep breath, her lips trembling between a smile and disbelief. "Do you ever stop proving me wrong?" she whispered. Peter smiled softly. "Not if it means earning your trust back." She looked at the studio sign again, then back at him. "You already did." The applause swelled once more as the audience cheered them both. Peter felt the tension that had hung between them finally dissolve, replaced by something quieter, something true. Later that night, when the crowd thinned and the cafe lights dimmed, Grace walked beside him through the empty hallway lined with her students' paintings. She stopped by one sketch, a child's drawing of a cup of coffee under falling snow, and traced the lines with her fingers. "It is funny," she said. "I used to think mistakes ruined people, but maybe the right mistake saves them." Peter looked at her with a gentle smile. "Then meeting you was the best mistake I ever made." Quote. A month later, the city finally bloomed into spring. The gray sidewalks were lined with tulips, and the Snowbean cafes were busier than ever. The Grace Studio had become the heart of it all, buzzing with laughter, art classes, and the aroma of coffee that mixed with fresh paint and possibility. Grace often arrived before sunrise, unlocking the doors and setting up the tables for her students. She no longer wore the tired expression Peter had first seen that snowy night. There was light in her eyes now, a calm strength that came from building something with her own hands. That morning, as she arranged a stack of sketchbooks by the window, she noticed a small envelope sitting on her desk. It had her name written in neat handwriting she knew too well. Inside was a note and a folded newspaper clipping. The note read, "For the woman who turned my waiting into purpose, Peter." The clipping was from a local magazine. The headline said, "From coffee to community, how one artist redefined a brand." Beneath it was a photo of Grace standing in front of the studio sign, smiling shyly. She smiled, shaking her head. "Always the dramatic one," she murmured. Just then, the door chimed. Peter walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, boss," he said playfully. Grace laughed. You know, that title suits me better than I expected. I was hoping you would say that, Peter replied. Because today I have one last surprise. Grace raised an eyebrow. Another one? You already put my name on a wall? This one is smaller, he said, handing her a small velvet box. Her heart skipped as she opened it. Inside was a silver necklace with a tiny charm shaped like a coffee cup, engraved with one simple word, fate. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. Peter, what is this? He took a slow breath. It is a promise, not the kind written in contracts or printed on signs. Just a promise that I will keep choosing you every ordinary day, not because fate told me to, but because I want to. Grace stared at him for a long moment. The world around them went quiet, the morning light painting gold across the floor. You are really terrible at keeping things professional, she said softly. Then fire me, he said with a grin. She laughed through her tears. Maybe later. He reached for her hand. You once said people do not get to start over, but we did. We turned a mistake into a story worth remembering. Grace nodded, her fingers tightening around his. Because this time we stopped pretending. Outside, the city stirred with life cars passing, people rushing to work, unaware that inside one small studio, two people who had once met by accident were quietly writing their own ending. Weeks later, the studio hosted its one-year anniversary event. Grace stood on stage, thanking the volunteers and families who had made the project a success. When she looked out into the crowd, she found Peter near the back, smiling the same patient smile he had worn the night they first met. After the applause faded, she walked down from the stage and met him by the door. You still wait in cafes too long, she teased. Old habits die hard, he said. As they stepped outside, snowflakes began to fall again soft, unexpected, like a memory repeating itself. Grace looked up at the sky and whispered, Do you think this is fate again? Peter smiled, placing his coat around her shoulders. No, he said. This is us choosing the same table twice. They stood together in the snowfall, the city glowing around them. And for once there was no pretending, no misunderstanding, just two hearts that had found their way back to the same place. Have you ever believed that life brings people back when the timing is finally right? Tell me in the comments, do you think love finds us by accident, or do we choose it when we are ready?